The morning on the ranch began the same way it always did, quiet, fresh, and full of calm. The sun had just started to rise, spreading soft golden light over the open fields. The grass shone with tiny drops of dew, and the cool breeze moved slowly, carrying the smell of earth, wood, and the distant horses. Jacob, the rancher who had lived here his whole life, stepped out of his small wooden house with a mug of warm tea in his hand. He liked these early hours. They helped him think clearly before the day's hard work began. Jacob was a man of routine. Every morning, he checked the fences, the barns, and the animals. Nothing on the ranch was too small for him. He had learned long ago that one weak fence could create big problems later, so he walked with steady steps, listening to the sounds around him, the birds waking up, the horses snorting softly, and the faint creaking of old wood. As he moved toward the north side of the ranch, he noticed something unusual. There was movement near the old barn, a place people didn't visit much anymore. The barn was the oldest building on the land, made by Jacob's grandfather many years ago. The wood was weak in some places, and the floor had several loose planks. Jacob had planned to repair it, but the job kept getting delayed because other tasks always needed attention. At first, Jacob thought it was just a stray animal. Maybe a goat had wandered too far. But as he took a few more steps, he saw a human figure. A woman. She was holding a camera in her hand and walking slowly, as if she was carefully looking for the right angle to take a picture. Jacob recognized the camera before he recognized the person. It was a clear sign she wasn't from the ranch, probably a visitor. He stopped for a moment and watched her from afar. She seemed lost in her own world, admiring the old barn from different sides. Her hair moved lightly in the wind, and she walked with curiosity, like someone who found beauty in small things. Jacob wondered what brought her here. But he didn't want to disturb her. People came to the countryside all the time to take pictures of horses, sunsets, and old buildings. It wasn't unusual. Then, suddenly, he saw her step onto the wooden plank near the barn, a plank he knew was loose. Before he could shout a warning, it happened. The wood shifted under her foot. She lost her balance and fell sideways with a sharp gasp. Her camera dropped from her hand and hit the ground with a soft thud. Jacob's heart jumped. He rushed toward her without thinking twice. When he reached her, she was trying to push herself up, but her face twisted in pain. She grabbed her ankle with both hands, her eyes squeezed shut. "Hey, are you all right?" Jacob asked, kneeling beside her. She opened her eyes and tried to sit properly. But the moment she moved her leg, a painful expression crossed her face again. She shook her head slowly. I think I twisted my ankle," she whispered, breathing heavily. Jacob carefully placed his hand near her ankle, not touching it yet, just trying to understand how bad it was. "Can you stand?" I don't know," she said softly. She tried again to lift herself. But the moment she put weight on her foot, her face went pale. She reached out, and her hand lightly touched Jacob's arm. Not for support, but because the pain startled her. "Easy. It hurts," she whispered in a trembling voice. Jacob froze for a moment. Her voice sounded small, scared, and unsure. He didn't want to make it worse. Everything about her expression told him she was in real pain. "It'll be over soon," he said gently, in the calm voice he used with injured animals. "I'm going to help you, but I'll be careful." She nodded, trusting him because she had no other choice. Jacob moved slowly, sliding one hand behind her back and the other under her arm. He didn't touch the injured ankle directly. Instead, he supported her from her upper body and helped her stand on her good foot. She leaned against him with hesitation, embarrassed and uncomfortable, but also relieved. "How far is your house?" she asked, her voice still weak. "Not far," he replied. "Just a few minutes from here. But we should go slowly." She looked at the ground, ashamed. "I'm really sorry. I didn't mean to trouble you." Jacob shook his head. "You're not trouble. Anyone could have stepped on that old plank. I should have fixed it earlier." She didn't answer. Her focus was on her pain. but she appreciated his kind tone. Together, they began walking. Jacob held most of her weight, making sure she didn't stumble. She tried not to hold on to him too tightly, but sometimes the pain surprised her, and she gripped his shirt for balance. "What's your name?" he asked, trying to distract her from the discomfort. "Elena," she said softly. "I'm visiting my aunt. She lives in the farmhouse near the hills." Jacob nodded. "I know the place. I've delivered hay there a few times. Your aunt is a good woman." Elena smiled faintly. "She always talks about her love for the countryside. I came here to take pictures for a photography project." "That's a good idea," Jacob replied. "There's a lot to capture around here. Just maybe not the old barn floor." She let out a small laugh despite the pain. "Yeah." Noted. They reached the ranch house, a simple wooden home that stood strong and warm. Jacob opened the door and guided her inside. He led her to a chair near the window, where sunlight gently entered the room. "Sit here," he said. "I'll get something for your ankle." Elena looked around the room. There were wooden shelves, old books, a few paintings, and a large table with tools neatly arranged. Everything felt simple but cared for. The room smelled like wood and fresh hay. Jacob returned with a bowl of cold water, a clean cloth, and a small first aid box. He knelt again, but this time he moved even more carefully. "I'm not a doctor," he admitted, "but I've handled many sprains on the ranch. We'll cool the swelling first." Elena nodded, trusting him. She bit her lip as he placed the cold cloth gently around her ankle. She didn't cry out, but he could see the pain in her eyes. "Sorry," Jacob said softly. "It's okay," she replied. "I'm just a little embarrassed." "No need to be," he said. "Happens to the best of us." They stayed quiet for a moment. The only sound was the ticking of an old wall clock. The calm silence helped Elena relax a little. "How old is this ranch?" she asked finally, trying to distract herself. "My grandfather built it," Jacob replied. "I grew up here, learned everything here." "It's beautiful," she said sincerely, looking out the window at the golden fields. Jacob smiled softly. "Thank you." After some time, the swelling seemed to settle a bit. Jacob removed the cloth and checked her ankle again. "You'll be okay," he said. "Just need rest and no walking on that foot today." Elena sighed in relief. "Thank you. Really. I don't know what I would have done if you weren't there." "You would have figured something out," Jacob said. "But I'm glad I was nearby." Elena leaned back in the chair, feeling safer and calmer than she expected. She looked at Jacob with gratitude in her eyes. He wasn't a doctor, or a guide, or someone she knew well, but in that moment, he felt like someone she could trust. Jacob stood up, washed his hands, and placed the bowl aside. "I'll call your aunt so she doesn't worry," he said. "Thank you," Elena whispered again, and as Jacob stepped outside to make the call, Elena watched him from the window, his steady steps, his calm nature, the quiet strength he carried. She didn't know why, but she felt thankful not just for his help, but for meeting someone like him in a moment of pain and weakness. The accident changed her day, but she didn't yet realize it was also the beginning of something unexpected. The afternoon sunlight entered the small ranch house softly, making the wooden floor shine a little. Elena sat quietly on the chair where Jacob had helped her earlier. Her ankle still hurt, but the pain was slowly becoming more manageable. She looked around the room with calm eyes, noticing little details she had missed before: old photographs hanging on the wall, a coat hung neatly by the door, and a pair of dusty boots tucked under the table. While she waited, she heard Jacob speaking softly outside. He was calling her aunt, explaining what had happened. His voice was steady and respectful, the kind of voice that instantly made a person feel that everything was under control. Elena appreciated that. It made her feel less guilty about causing trouble. After a few minutes, Jacob stepped back inside. He wiped his hands on a towel and gave her a small smile. "I spoke to your aunt," he said. "She was a little worried at first, but I told her you're safe here. She'll come pick you up in a bit." Elena nodded. "Thank you for calling her. I'm sure she must have panicked." Jacob shook his head. It's normal for family to worry. But she knows you're okay. Ah. Elena let out a slow breath of relief. Her shoulders relaxed. It was comforting to know her aunt wouldn't be too stressed. Jacob walked toward the small kitchen area and began filling a glass with water. Here, he said, as he handed it to her. Drink this. You might feel better. She accepted the glass carefully. Thank you. Jacob sat down on the chair across from her, keeping a respectful distance but close enough to check on her ankle if needed. He looked at her gently, as if trying to read her expression. How are you feeling now? He asked. It still hurts, she admitted. But it's better than before. I can at least talk without feeling like crying. He smiled a little. Good. That means it's not too bad. Elena placed the empty glass on the table and then looked at him again. I'm really sorry for disturbing your day. You must have had a lot of work to do. Jacob shrugged lightly. There's always work on a ranch. It can wait. People come first. His simple words made her pause. In the city, where she spent most of her time, people rarely said things like that. Everyone was busy, rushing from one place to another. Here, things felt slower, quieter, kinder. She smiled at him, a small, grateful smile. Still, thank you. This time he didn't argue. He simply nodded. For a while, they sat in comfortable silence. The ticking clock, the sound of wind through the window, and the distant neighing of a horse created a peaceful atmosphere. Elena leaned her head back, enjoying the calmness of the place. Jacob noticed her looking around and decided to break the quiet. Do you like photography? He asked, nodding toward her camera lying on the table. She looked at the camera with a sad expression. I hope it still works, she said with a small laugh. It fell pretty hard. Jacob picked it up carefully and inspected it. He knew little about cameras, but he checked the outside for cracks. It looks okay from here, he said. But you'll need to test it to be sure. I will, she said. I love photography. It's my way of seeing the world differently. Jacob leaned back in his chair slightly. How so? She smiled softly. Sometimes we walk past things without noticing them. The light, the colors, the emotion in a scene. But when I take photos, I feel like I'm capturing a piece of time that would otherwise disappear. He nodded thoughtfully. Makes sense. We all see the same world, but not in the same way. Elena looked at him curiously. And what about you? How do you see the world? Jacob chuckled quietly. Simple. If the animals are fed and the fences are strong, the day is good. Elena laughed gently. That's a nice way to live. It works for me, he replied, smiling. She studied him for a moment, noticing how his face looked calm and steady. He was the kind of person who didn't need many words. His presence alone brought peace. Jacob noticed her ankle again and leaned forward. Do you mind if I check the swelling once more? She shook her head. No. Please go ahead. He moved to kneel beside her just like before. His movements were slow and respectful. He touched the area gently and observed how she reacted. It's still swollen, he said. But it's not getting worse. That's good. Your aunt can take you home, and you should rest it for a day or two. Elena nodded. Thank you for checking again. Jacob stood up and sat back in his chair. You should be careful walking near the old barn. It's not safe around that area. I didn't know, she said softly. It's not your fault, he replied. I should have fixed it earlier. I'll make sure I repair it soon. Elena could feel how responsible he felt. It wasn't even his mistake, but he still blamed himself. That said a lot about his character. You take good care of this ranch, she said. Jacob looked around the room, at the tools, the old photographs, the dusty boots, and the sunlight touching the wooden floor. I've lived here all my life, he said. It means something to me. Elena's voice softened. I can feel that. A small knock on the door interrupted them. Jacob stood up and opened it. It was Elena's aunt, breathless and worried, her hands clasped together. Oh dear, "Are you all right?" she exclaimed as she rushed inside. Elena tried to reassure her. "I'm fine, Aunt Maria." Maria hugged her tightly before turning to Jacob with grateful eyes. "Thank you so much, Jacob. I don't know what would have happened if you weren't here." Jacob smiled modestly. "It was nothing. Anyone would have helped." Maria shook her head. "No, not everyone. Thank you." Elena felt warmth in her chest, seeing the way her aunt appreciated Jacob. It wasn't just gratitude, it was trust. Maria placed her hand on Elena's shoulder. "Can you stand?" "With help?" Elena said. Jacob stepped forward again. "I'll support her." Elena held his arm as she stood up, careful not to put pressure on the injured foot. When she balanced herself, Maria took her other arm gently. "Ready?" Maria asked. Elena nodded. "Yes." As they walked slowly toward the door, Elena turned back for a moment, looking at the inside of Jacob's house one more time. The warm light, the quiet beauty, the simple comfort. She felt something she didn't expect. She wanted to see it again. Before leaving, Elena looked at Jacob and said softly, "Thank you for everything." Jacob gave her a small smile. "Take care of that ankle. And don't worry about the barn. I'll fix it." Elena smiled in return. "I know you will. I know you will." As Maria helped her into the car, Jacob stepped back, watching them with calm eyes. The engine started, and the car rolled slowly down the dirt road. Elena looked out of the window, watching him grow smaller in the distance until he disappeared behind the line of trees. But even after he was out of sight, the feeling of safety and kindness he gave her stayed with her. She didn't know why, but she felt certain this wasn't the last time she would visit the ranch. Something inside her whispered that this accident had changed more than just her plans. It had started something new. A soft morning breeze moved through the curtains of Elena's room as she slowly opened her eyes. The pain in her ankle had lessened over the past few days, and she could finally stand without wincing too much. She stretched her arms and smiled a little, remembering the ranch, the wooden house, and the quiet kindness in Jacob's eyes. Her days since the accident had been calm. Her aunt made her rest, brought her warm tea, and reminded her at least 20 times not to walk too much. But even while resting, Elena's mind kept traveling back to the ranch, not because of the barn, or the fields, or the horses, but because of him. There was something about Jacob's gentle way of speaking, the care in his voice, and the steady strength of his presence that she couldn't forget. She wanted to thank him again, not because she felt obligated, but because something inside her insisted on seeing him again. That morning, she made a decision. She would go back to the ranch. Not with empty hands, though. She wanted to bring something meaningful. So she asked her aunt if she could use the kitchen. Maria, noticing her niece's unusual excitement, simply smiled and nodded. For the next 2 hours, Elena worked carefully. She prepared a basket filled with homemade food, warm bread, cheese, fruit, and a jar of honey. Her aunt helped her pack everything neatly. "Are you going to visit Jacob?" Maria asked with a knowing smile. Elena blushed slightly. "Yes. I just want to thank him again." Maria tapped her arm gently. "He's a good man. You're safe around people like him." Elena smiled. "That's exactly how I feel." When the basket was ready, she stepped outside and breathed in the fresh morning air. The sun was warm but gentle, painting the whole sky in soft colors. Her ankle felt much better, so she walked slowly but confidently toward the ranch, following the dirt path she remembered. Every step reminded her of how she had fallen that day, how helpless she felt, and how Jacob had taken care of her without hesitation. The memory didn't bring embarrassment anymore, just gratitude. As she approached the ranch, she saw him from a distance. Jacob was carrying a wooden beam on his shoulder and walking toward the old barn. He looked strong and calm. Just like the first day she saw him, his steps were steady, and his focus was on the task as if nothing else in the world existed. Elena felt a soft flutter in her chest. When he finally noticed her walking toward him, he paused. His eyes showed surprise, then warmth. He set the wooden beam down and wiped his hands on his jeans. "You're walking," he said with a smile. "That's a good sign." Elena nodded, holding the basket carefully. "Yes. It still hurts a little, but it's much better now." Jacob looked relieved. "I'm glad." She held out the basket toward him. "I brought this for you. A small thank you for helping me." He blinked in surprise. "You didn't have to do that." "I know," she said softly, "but I wanted to." Jacob hesitated for a moment before taking the basket. He looked inside and saw the neatly arranged food. This is too much," he said, a little shy. She smiled. "It's not. It's just a thank you." Jacob nodded, touched. "Then, thank you. Really." Jacob nodded. Elena looked around and noticed the tools near the barn. "Are you fixing the old barn floor?" "Yes," he replied. "I'm replacing the weak planks, so no one steps on them again." There was a gentle, unspoken understanding in the air between them. She knew he was doing this, partly because of what happened to her, and that made her heart warm. "Can I see?" she asked. Jacob nodded. "Sure. Just be careful where you step." They walked together to the barn, Jacob slowing his steps so she wouldn't strain her ankle. Inside, the light filtered through the old windows, creating patterns of dust in the air. The place looked worn but filled with history. Jacob pointed to the floor. "That's where you fell. The plank was broken from underneath. I'm removing the old boards now." Elena looked down at the spot, remembering the sudden pain. She shook her head lightly. "It's strange how one small moment can change everything." Jacob looked at her curiously. "Change everything?" She turned her eyes toward him. "If I hadn't stepped there, I wouldn't have met you." Her words, though simple, carried a softness that made Jacob pause. He didn't know what to say for a moment. He wasn't used to such honest words. "I'm glad I was there," he said finally. They shared a gentle smile before Jacob invited her to sit on a chair near the entrance where the sunlight was brighter. "Your ankle still needs rest," he said. She sat down, and he placed the basket on a nearby table. Then he opened it, his eyes lighting up slightly at the sight of the food. "This looks really good," he said. "Thank you again." "You're welcome." For a few moments, they just sat together, listening to the peaceful sounds of the ranch, the wind, the rustling grass, the distant neigh of a horse. It felt natural, comforting, as though silence was another way of speaking between them. After a while, Jacob asked, "Would you like to see the rest of the ranch?" Slowly, of course. Elena nodded excitedly. "I would love to." They began walking together, taking a slow and gentle path. First, they went to the horse stable. The horses lifted their heads as they approached, recognizing Jacob instantly. One of them, a brown horse with a white patch, walked closer. "This is Storm," Jacob said. "He's a bit shy with new people, but very gentle." Elena held out her hand slowly. The horse sniffed her fingers and then nudged her palm gently. She laughed softly. "He's beautiful." Jacob watched her with a quiet smile. Seeing her relaxed and happy made him feel something warm inside. They continued walking, stopping near the large open fields. The grass moved with the wind like an ocean of green. Elena took out her camera and snapped a few photos, relieved that it still worked. "You take nice pictures," Jacob said. She laughed. "You haven't seen them." "I don't have to. I can see how you look at things." His words made her heart skip. She lowered her camera and looked at him. "You notice a lot, don't you?" Jacob shrugged a little. "When you live alone, you pay attention to small things." Elena felt a touch of sadness hearing that. "Do you ever feel lonely here?" Jacob looked at the fields for a moment, thinking, "Sometimes. But I'm used to it." Something in his voice made her want to reach out and hold his hand. But she didn't. Instead, she said softly, "Everyone needs someone to talk to." "I guess so," he replied quietly. They walked further until they reached a hill that overlooked the ranch. The view was breathtaking, the open land, the barns, the horses, and the sky stretching endlessly. "This is my favorite place," Jacob said. "It's beautiful," Elena whispered. As she took a step forward, her foot landed on uneven ground. She wobbled slightly, almost losing balance. Jacob instantly reached out and caught her arm, steadying her before she could fall. The moment his hand touched her, something warm and electric moved between them, not romantic in an exaggerated way, but simple, real, and comforting. Elena looked up at him, breathless not from fear, but from the closeness. "Thank you," she whispered. Jacob didn't let go immediately. He held her gently, making sure she was stable. "Careful," he said softly. "Your ankle is still healing." "I know," she whispered. They remained close for a few seconds, the world around them quiet and still. Elena saw something new in his eyes, softness mixed with concern, and a quiet connection she didn't expect. Jacob slowly let go of her arm, but the warmth stayed. They spent the next hour talking about her photography, his life on the ranch, their dreams, and their worries. Elena listened to him with more interest than she had ever listened to anyone. Jacob listened to her with the same focus, as if her words truly mattered. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, Elena felt a sense of peace she hadn't felt in a long time. Before she left, she turned to Jacob and smiled. "Thank you for today, and for everything before today." Jacob nodded. "I'm glad you came." She took one last look at the ranch, the place where pain had brought her, but something else was making her stay longer in her thoughts. Something gentle, something meaningful, something beginning. The sun had begun to rise slowly over the ranch, painting the sky with soft orange and golden colors. The cool morning air touched Hannah's face as she stepped outside the small wooden house. Birds were waking up, singing in the trees as if they were welcoming a fresh beginning. For a moment, she closed her eyes and breathed in deeply. It felt different today, more peaceful, more hopeful. Caleb was already awake. She saw him at a distance, near the horse's stable, brushing one of the older horses with slow, gentle hands. His movements were calm, almost thoughtful, as if he was not only caring for the horse but also trying to understand the quiet around him. When he lifted his head and saw Hannah walking toward him, a small smile appeared on his face. It was not a big smile, but it was warm, and that small warmth meant a lot. "Morning," he said. "Morning," she replied softly. Neither of them rushed the moment. They stood there for a few seconds, just looking at each other, feeling the newness of the day. Even though both had many responsibilities waiting, they knew that this morning was not like the others. Something had changed. Something gentle and healing had started growing between them slowly, quietly, and naturally. Hannah stepped closer and touched the horse's neck. "He looks happy today," Caleb nodded. "He trusts easily. Sometimes animals understand things better than humans." Hannah understood what he meant. Trust was not easy for either of them, but they were both trying. She admired that about Caleb. He did not pretend to be perfect. He did not hide from his mistakes. He faced them with honesty, and that honesty was slowly helping both of them heal. After a short silence, Caleb said, "There's something I want to show you." She looked up, curious. He pointed toward the hill behind the barn. "Not far. 10 minutes walk." She nodded, and they began walking side by side. The ground was soft from the night's dew, and the wind moved gently through the tall grass. Hannah felt light today, lighter than she had in months. Each step made her feel closer to understanding the meaning of everything that had happened. When they reached the top of the hill, the view took her breath away. From there, she could see almost the entire ranch, the fields, the quiet river, the small houses, and the open sky stretching endlessly above everything. It was peaceful, untouched, and beautiful, in a simple way. "It's amazing," she whispered. Caleb stood a little behind her, giving her space to take it all in. "Whenever things feel heavy," he said quietly, "I come here. It reminds me that even when life feels difficult, the world still has calm places." She turned to him slowly. He wasn't looking at the view anymore, he was looking at her. There was something sincere in his eyes, something that made her feel safe. "I thought maybe," he continued, "you might find comfort here too." Hannah felt her chest warm, not because of the place alone, but because someone had thought of her feelings. Someone had cared enough to bring her somewhere that helped them when they were hurting. That small act meant more than any big gesture. "Thank you," she said softly. Caleb nodded once, shyly, then looked away toward the horizon, as if embarrassed by his own sincerity. They sat on a large flat rock at the top of the hill. The wind carried the scent of grass and soil. Hannah watched the ranch below and thought about how far she had come. When she had first arrived, she had been confused, scared, unsure of herself. She had felt like a burden, someone without direction. But now, things had changed. She had found strength inside herself that she didn't know she had. She had found calmness in the everyday routines of the ranch. And she had found a friend, maybe something more in Caleb. After a long pause, Caleb spoke again. "I've been thinking a lot. About the past, about yesterday, about everything." Hannah looked at him with quiet attention. "I want to do better," he said. "Not just for you. For myself too. I don't want to run away from things anymore. I want to fix what can be fixed and build something healthier." Hannah felt emotion rising inside her. She had never asked him to fix everything. She had never asked him to change. But hearing him say this showed how deeply he cared. "You're already trying," she said. "And that means more than you think." He breathed out slowly, almost relieved. "I didn't want to lose your trust." "You didn't lose it," she replied gently. "You're earning it slowly." They shared a quiet smile. After a while, they walked back down the hill. The ranch was beginning to come alive. Workers were starting their day. Horses were being taken out, and the sound of laughter floated from the kitchen, where breakfast was being prepared. Life continued, but something inside both Hannah and Caleb had shifted. Later that afternoon, they worked together repairing a broken fence. It wasn't complicated work, but it required teamwork. Caleb handed her the wooden pieces, while Hannah hammered them in place. Sometimes they spoke, sometimes they worked in silence, but the silence wasn't uncomfortable anymore. It had turned into a peaceful space where both felt understood. At one point, the hammer slipped from Hannah's hand. Caleb reacted quickly, catching her wrist gently before it struck the wrong place. Their eyes met for a second longer than usual. There was no awkwardness, no confusion, just a soft awareness between them that felt natural. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded. "Yes, thanks." He let go slowly, almost reluctantly, then stepped back to give her space again. As the day went on, things felt more settled. Hannah felt more at home than she ever expected. The ranch, with its simple routines and open land, had become a place where she could rebuild her life. And Caleb, with all his imperfections and quiet strength, had become someone she trusted deeply. In the evening, when the sun was setting behind the mountains, Caleb walked her back to her cabin. The sky was filled with soft pink and violet colors, and the air smelled like warm dust and calm wind. Before she went inside, he paused as if searching for the right words. "I know we still have a long way to go," he said quietly. "But I'm glad you stayed." She felt her heart warm again. "I'm glad I stayed too." There was a long, gentle silence. The kind of silence that did not feel empty, it felt meaningful. It felt like the start of something new. Caleb took a small step back, giving her space, but still looking at her with a softness she had not seen before. "If you ever need anything," he said, "I'm here." "I know," Hannah replied, "and I appreciate it." He nodded once, then turned and walked away slowly toward his own cabin. Hannah watched him until he disappeared behind the trees. Only then did she step inside her room, close the door softly, and lean against it with a peaceful smile. For the first time in a long time, she felt truly hopeful. She knew the future would not be perfect. There would still be challenges, still moments of doubt, still days that felt heavy. But she also knew she wasn't alone anymore. She had found a place where she could breathe freely, heal gently, and grow stronger. And she had found someone who respected her, cared for her, and wanted to build something honest with her. As she lay down on her bed and listened to the quiet night outside, she knew deep inside her heart that this was not the end of her story. It was only the beginning of something beautiful, kind, and meaningful. A new chapter had begun, and this time, she wasn't afraid.